Ambassador Wambugu wa Kamau.
Today we are analyzing the book called Blossoms of the Savannah, and to take us through is none other than Mr. Kimani. Hello, Mr. Kimani.
Hey,
how are you?
I'm very fine, thank you.
Welcome to this program.
Thank you.
We are in a Maasai land today.
Thank you. I can even see the decor and everything is Maasai.
Yes.
Which is very appropriate because of the book that we are talking about.
Yes.
Blossoms of the Savannah.
Yes. Can you kindly tell us who is the author of this book?
So, as we all know from the cover page, the book is written by none other than Henry Ole Kulet, a Maasai writer of great renown. And this is a man who has emerged as a very, very prolific writer. He has earned himself some awards, like the Jomo Kenyatta Literary Prize, which he won twice. One of those times being with this book, Blossoms of the Savannah. So, though we have not heard of him in literary circles, especially when it comes to set books for some time, this is the first time we are getting a book in the curriculum, in the secondary school curriculum, which is talking about Maasai land and which is talking about Maasai culture. So it was published in 2008, and we are talking about a writer who has also come up with several other books. For instance, he has written a book known as Vanishing Hands, which he published after Blossoms of the Savannah in 2011. He has published Moran No More, Daughters of Man, Bandits of Kibi, To Be a Man, The Hunter, among many others.
Oh.
And most of his books talk about the change, the transition that is slowly taking place in Maasai land and in many other African cultures, where we cannot continue holding on to traditions, especially those traditions that are harmful to the human person. So in this particular book, he addresses some harmful traditions like early marriage and female circumcision.
This is a personal question.
Yes.
How does it feel to teach in Maasai land and teaching Blossoms of Savannah?
Okay.
Since I think the students are familiar maybe with some terminologies used there.
I have been honored to live and work in Maasai land for close to 15 years now.
Wow.
And majority of my students, as you rightfully put it, are from Maasai background. And they can identify with a lot of the issues that are raised here. Not just in terms of knowing how to pronounce the words that are definitely given at the back. Of course, the translations are given at the back. But they have gone through some of the practices that take place here. They can identify with the issues that are raised. When they talk about Resian and Tayo, the two daughters of Ole Kaelo, most of the time I can easily, as I'm teaching, I can easily also identify with some of the issues, because I know that as a teacher and also as a counselor, I also tend to deal with some such issues in my day-to-day work.
Wonderful.
Yeah, so it's a very personal experience for me.
You come from Kajiado, you teach in Kajiado, and what we'll do, we'll just baptize you and call you Ole Kimani.
Amen.
Is it Ole Kimani?
That is fine.
You can call me Wambugu
Ole Kamau. Yes.
Also, in the same. I think we are similar in that because I've also been born and brought up in Kajiado, Masai land.
You actually went to school there.
I was even born and brought up in Kajiado. I think if I was asked, I would say I'm a son of Kajiado, Masai. And I'm not saying it for the sake of this book, but anyway, that is something we can discuss later.
True.
In the meantime, I'm happy to know that Ole Kulet is a prolific writer. He has written other books. I've read No More Moran, and it was an interesting book. I read it as a class reader.
Related to the question of the writer and his tendency to talk about cultural transition, this title is simply capturing that theme very well, the theme of change and transition. The word blossoms refers to flowers. The word savanna refers to mainly the land of the Maasai, which is mostly grassland, right? And as we say, when we talk of the savanna land, we are talking about the background, the area where the Maasai live, right? So blossoms of the savanna, the phrase blossoms of the savanna is indeed taken from a song that is sung by some young girls who are living in a ranch known as Ntare na Aju. And this ranch is owned and run by a lady called Minik Enenkoitoi. This lady is a fighter against female circumcision, and in her work she's been able to rescue several girls, and at the end of the story we find her rescuing two of the main characters, that is Resian and Tayo. So Blossoms of the Savannah is taken from a song that they sing in celebration of their achievement, in celebration of their movement away from their homes where they have been rescued by Minik. So they say that they are the blossoms of the savannah, and according to them, they are turning a new page. They are starting a new life, whereby they will no longer be forced to practice female circumcision. They will no longer be forced to get into early marriages, and they will not force their daughters, when their time comes, to also go through the same. So it's a very relevant title, and we expect that it is referring to the future. It is a future-oriented title, whereby some of the practices that we see, the harmful practices that we see taking place inside the story, will not be expected to be taking place later. Those who interact with this story up to the end, I would say they are able to understand the title, in as far as the title refers to the new generation of young people, young Maasai people, or people also living in such circumstances elsewhere in the world, who are willing to change for the better, who are willing to retain the good side of their culture and drop the harmful side of their culture.
Having told us about the author, tell us about the setting of this book.
I'm sure a viewer, you are able to see our analysis of A Doll's House. We talk of setting in a multidimensional way. We can talk of historical setting, that is when the story is set. We can talk of the geographical setting, where the story is set. We can talk of cultural setting, in which cultural dispensation is the story told. Beginning with the historical setting, we can place this story somewhere around 2002, 2003. This is because in the story, the writer mentions the general elections of 2003, when the opposition came together and was able to dislodge the government that was in power then. So we are able to pinpoint that particular time in Kenyan history within the story. We can place this story between three basic areas. One of them is Nakuru, where Mr. Ole Kaelo has been living with his family and working at a company called Agribix Limited until the point where he is retrenched from his job. Then he relocates to Nasila, in Narok, where he stays with his family, and much of the action takes place in Nasila. Then later on, we move on to a place called Ingito. Ingito is the home of one of the characters called Olarinkoi, who pretends to save one of the daughters of Olekaelo, that is Resian, from being married off to Oloisudori and subsequently being circumcised by force. So he stays with her for some days before she is moved by someone called Nabaru from that home to the ranch that I was talking about, where Minik and Nkoitoi is living. So there are 3 or 4 settings or physical settings where we can identify. Culturally, we are talking about the Ma culture. It's a Ma setting. And when we talk of Ma, we are not simply referring to the Maasai. I think we know the Ma culture encompasses the Maasai, the Samburu, and all those pastoralist communities that live within our land, and they identify themselves as the Ma. So we want to place the setting in that particular cultural dispensation.
Yes.
Yes.
Is the date when the book was written significant in any way in explaining the setting of the book?
It is very significant. It is very important because, as I said, we cannot avoid mentioning the historical setting. That is when the story was set. And since we are talking about the turn of the millennium,
yes,
1 or 2 years after the turn of the millennium, in 2002, that was a time of change. We had a lot of changes within our country, political changes, social changes, cultural changes, and this book addresses some of those changes, including the cultural changes. So it is important to place that, because if this book was told, or the story was told 10 years previously or 20 years previously, some of the radical changes that we see happening here may not have been possible then.
Yes.
For example, the conflict between Minik and Nkoitoi and the Maasai men, the old men like Ole Supeo in the story. Some years previously, it may not have been possible. Maybe she would have been condemned to death or something.
Yes.
But because we are talking about a time in our history when transition is taking place, there is more recognition of the rights of women and the need to change our culture, then we are able to place such characters in such a time. During that time, and maybe even in our time today, we also have many characters, many people who are known, some not so well known, who are fighting against female genital mutilation, who have done a lot of work to rescue girls from early marriages, to rescue girls from homes where they were under the threat of being circumcised forcefully. We know them. Though we are talking about Minik in this story, who is a fictional character, we are also talking about many people, Maasai and non-Maasai, who have taken it upon themselves to bring about change the radical way by going and trying to save some of them from undergoing the female genital mutilation.
Talking about people
Yes.
who have fought for women's, especially girls' rights, I think I'm one of them.
Excellent.
Maybe you may not know it, but I have done so using posters showing a girl moving from one level. You can see that I've advocated for the rights of the girl. Although this book, I think it's coming too late. When you talk about 2000, the year 2002, 2003, was culture that serious in Narok and all those geographical setting areas you're talking about?
Okay, in my view, as I said earlier on, I have been working in Maasai land for 15 plus years.
Yes.
Despite the fact that harmful cultural practices like female circumcision have been banned by government, some people still practice these cultures and these traditions secretly. So we cannot say that we are totally out of the woods, that people have been totally convinced and that they are no longer practicing it. I believe it is still happening. And when we talk of 2002, that's about 20 or so years ago.
Yes.
This culture, this practice was still going on. Yeah, in fact, I believe at that time we had not even had a lot of legal
Framework.
interventions, yeah, or legal frameworks that were able to bring about the fight to fruition, the fight against FGM. I do remember in 2003 when the NAC government came under Mwai Kibaki. That was the first time we had a ministry of gender. And one of the mandates of that ministry was to begin fighting against FGM. Today, as we speak, I think we have a commission, a legal commission, which is mandated to purely fight against female genital mutilation. So I don't believe that it is late. I believe it is timely. This story is very timely, and it could not have come at a better time when our girls need empowerment. I think it is not just with regard to FGM. Our girls need empowerment in terms of education. They need empowerment in terms of industry and many other areas.
Yes. No,
Yes.
my daughter is educated.
Yes.
Or I assume I'm educated. I'm an elite. I'm a parent who is more
Exposed.
civilized and
Yes.
exposed. Will this book be of any great help to these girls now?
Very.
Because our audience, we have schools in town, major towns, Nairobi, you know. Will this book be any significance reading stories of FGM to people who cannot even go there? Because even my daughter cannot think about that.
Thank you. That's a very relevant question, and which raises a very important issue in this particular story. Because if we assume that majority of the Kenyan student girls are living like your beautiful daughter in a protected environment, probably urban environment, I think we would be practicing what we call the ostrich syndrome, where we bury our head in the sand. This story talks about two girls, Resian and Tayo, who have been brought up in more or less a protected environment like your own daughter. And they have grown up knowing that all they need to do is go to school, perform well. Probably after school they'll be able to go and make a contribution to society without anybody harming them. Little do they know that they are also part of a cultural setting. They are Maasai, and there are some expectations that come with being Maasai, a Maasai girl. They cannot, forget or ignore their background. That is why when they go back to Nasila, they are surprised to realize that they are expected to conform to the culture. They are expected to be circumcised so that they can be accepted by the women as grown-up women who are ready for marriage. Now, when we talk of the modern girl who is going to school, secondary school to primary school and all that, there is no way she can ignore the fact that she has come from a cultural background. And there is no way she can ignore that these things are happening to her fellow girls back in the village. And majority of our people do not necessarily live in towns. They live in those rural areas. And that is where harmful cultural practices may easily be practiced,
Yes.
without necessarily considering that they have gone to school. Mr. Olekaelo himself, the father to these two girls, is an educated man.
Yes.
He has gone to school. He has a job, a formal employment. Yet, he is among the people in the front line to advocate for his daughters, his own daughters, to be circumcised so that they can, conform to the Maasai cultural practices and expectations.
Hey,